The Flames. History's greatest secret and key to a future where ships travel lifetimes to bring flames to new worlds. Those who dare to walk the fire can cross between the stars with a step if you can find a ferryman and pay your way across. For most who brave the flame alone are lost forever. May the ferryman take you. Battlefront. Written by Steve Umstead. Hurry, there isn't much time. I stared open-mouthed at the figure kneeling in front of me. It was dressed in what appeared to be some type of combat armor, or at least what appeared to be armor through all the mud and grass it was covered in. The figure wore a helmet with a blacked-out visor. I couldn't even tell if I was facing a man or woman. The computer-generated voice it put out didn't point me in one direction or the other, but it scared the living hell out of me. I looked back over my shoulder at my guide. The poor woman looked even more frightened than I felt. Mary Beth Rush was her name, a proper and refined woman of probably 60 years. She was my designated ferryman for this sightseeing tour of the Crescent Arm worlds. She stood transfixed, the flickering light from the flames dancing on her right cheek. Her only movement was a constant shaking of her shoulders. She would certainly be no help in calming my own nerves. I turned back to the suited figure, which had come crashing through the steel door on the far side of the Flames transit chamber just seconds ago. It slowly stood up, helmet panning from side to side. It carried a long, deadly-looking weapon, but it was pointed at the floor. In the background I heard rumbling, like thunder, only more staccato. The one portal from the chamber to the outside world showed faint flashes of orange. I was oddly reminded of my childhood, watching a distant fireworks display. But this was not the nature reserve planet of Viridian the guidebooks back on Earth promised. It was a war zone. The figure's visor showed a reflection of the flames behind me, the flames which had brought me here with the assistance of my ferryman. I had paid quite a large sum of money to be taken on a private tour of 8 worlds. Each was reached instantaneously through the powers of the flames, and each was unique in one way or another. The 3 I had already visited were stunning. Malachite, with its crystalline mountains, Boreas, with its purple skies, Alacanth, with its floating islands. The lush Viridian was famous across the galaxy for its semi-sentient plants, something I was truly looking forward to. It would be part of my university thesis on intelligence in lower species. It was crucial to it, as a matter of fact. But something in the posture of the soldier, as I assumed it was, told me I wouldn't be visiting any magical forests. I said, "Hurry," the electronic voice said again. It seemed to be coming from the sides of the figure's helmet, but still gave me no indication who or what was inside. "Hurry for what reason?" I asked. I felt the confidence building in me. How dare this dirty thing interrupt my tour? I had paid very good money. Well, my father had. But that was beside the point. This was a once-in-a-lifetime— "Hurry or you die, along with the next planet." It stepped forward, and before I could protest, it had grabbed my upper arm, pushing me back towards the flames. My guide was still rooted to the floor. "What are you talking about?" My voice cracked slightly, and I fought to maintain control even as the soldier's grip tightened. "I'm supposed to tour the Forest of the Winds today. I have a ticket." "There is no more Forest of the Winds," the monotone voice replied. "It was burned away by the Collective 2 months ago. Now get moving." Burned away? This wasn't right. Something got crossed in the transit through the flames. I wasn't where I was supposed to be. My father would never forgive me for wasting his money. I knew I needed to demand a refund. I shrugged out of the soldier's grip and turned to face it. I placed my hands on my hips and tried to assume a posture of authority, as my father had taught me to do so long ago when dealing with an impudent servant. "Listen, you. My name is Alexandra Whitcomb, heir to the Whitcomb mining fortune on Venigari Prime. You can't simply—" "Shut up and listen, Whitcomb." I heard my mouth snap shut. "We have no surviving ferryman left," it said. The helmet turned towards the portal glass as a particularly large flash lit up, then back to me. You need to go forward to warn the next planet. The flames are the only way to get ahead of the collective's advance. It waved a black-handed glove towards the flames. Go now. We project the next planet in their path as Eunesis. The helmet turned towards Marybeth Rush. Can you travel to Eunesis? The guide's mouth opened and closed several times, like a fish lying on the deck of a boat. She blinked several times, then finally nodded. Yes, she said weakly. Then go. Now. The soldier dropped its weapon and grabbed my arm again. With its other hand it grabbed Rush and pulled both of us towards the flames. The heat grew in intensity, something that had always frightened me about traveling via the flames, but with the ferryman I knew I'd be safe. Safer than here, I thought, as another flash lit the chamber from outside. Tell them not to trust any communications from approaching collective ships. No trading requests. No emergency landing requests, the soldier said as it pushed me ahead of it. I felt Rush's hand slip into mine, preparing to enter the flames. But who is the collective? I asked. I thought I heard a laugh through the helmet speakers. They used to be just like us, but they got greedy. Now they want it all. A loud crash sounded against the door to the outside. The soldier shoved me in the back. Go, it yelled. I will hold them off as long as I can. Enough time for you to transit, but go now. I turned and looked over my shoulder. The soldier was fiddling with the weapon, and I heard a low whine from it, then a muffled electronic curse. The helmet swiveled up and looked at me. I will warn them, I said, then swallowed as I realized what the soldier just said. It would give its life to allow us to escape. Good luck. Another electronic laugh, this one more pronounced. No such thing as luck. But if there is, good luck to you, too. I felt Rush's hand squeeze mine, and the heat grew. We stepped into the flames together, and everything went cold. Corporal Whitcomb! The shout roused me from my semi-sleep. The skies were darkening. Night was fast approaching. The time of day the collective enjoyed the killing most of all. The time we were most likely to be attacked. I rose from my prone position, pulling the camo netting off my body. I checked my sidearm. The battery pack showed 78%, which was as good as I figured it would get. Our supplies of batteries were dwindling. The collective raids were doing one hell of a job on our supply line, and the unit's techs could only do so much in refurbishing existing gear. My Stig P-12 pistol was subsisting off a rudimentary solar charger. God help me if we ended up in a firefight first thing in the morning, before Genesis's weak sunlight broke through the thick jungle canopy. 3 months, I thought. I had been here 3 months. Today? 3 months since I stepped through the flames with that bitch of a ferryman who had immediately stepped back through without me once she heard the explosions outside of Genesis's transit chamber. Rush had left me alone, and nearly left me for dead, if not for a fortuitous encounter in a bombed-out shop I was trying to steal water from that same day. Instead, the militia group that found me saved me. Quite literally, in fact, seeing as how a collective attack was about to hit the city in which the Flames chamber was located. 3 months. 3 long months. But 3 months that had changed me forever. I laughed as I tied my combat boots. Those first few days were the scariest of my life. I hadn't even gone out barefoot in my entire life. And by the end of that week, I was drinking from streams and eating live bugs to survive. Surviving, along with the rest of my new family. Our unit was much more than that original militia now. From 16 lost souls to a cohesive platoon of over 100 Genesis survivors, we had come a long way. And what some people back on Venigari Prime called my arrogance turned into something more. Leadership. Now here I was, a corporal in a ragtag army, fighting the collective on a far-off planet I never expected to visit. Eunesis wasn't in the guidebooks for vacation stops. It was a backwater hole, off the beaten path, but the Stone Mountain ranges just north and south of the equator contain vast amounts of rare earth minerals, invaluable for energy production and weapons systems. The collective, which apparently started as a pan-galactic consortium of businesses that broke ties with Earth due to taxation issues, wanted Eunesis. And as with the other planets, it didn't care what was in its way. I remembered the lone soldier in the departure chamber on Viridian, its plea for help to warn the next planet. But I had known in the first few seconds after arriving on Eunesis that I was too late. I had failed the soldier, though I somewhat made peace with myself that it was through no fault of my own. My unit leader said the collective was moving much more quickly than reports initially suspected. They were raising a planet every month. There truly wasn't any such thing as luck. I tied the laces and covered both boots in the protective straps to prevent the laces from flapping or getting caught in the underbrush, which the Selva de la Muerte we were operating in had plenty of. Our unit had stayed on the move for over 2 weeks as the collective spread across the planet. Eunesis had proven to be a thorn in their side. Too many small villages scattered along the planet's thick equatorial jungles to bomb from orbit. They had to send squads down in shuttles and root the inhabitants out one by one, and we were making them pay. As with doomed Viridian, there were no ferrymen left on Eunesis either. The collective targeted them, along with any chambers housing flames, immediately upon reaching orbit. Precise kinetic bombardment took out known flame sites. They didn't want anyone to get away, and they were ruthless about it. The first shuttles to land carried elite assassins, modified soldiers who brutally interrogated the local population into giving up the identities of any ferryman. Those ferrymen were hunted down and killed. Travel to and from that planet was relegated to starships, and no starship captain in his or her right mind wanted to stray into a war zone. Eunesis, like so many other planets in the collective's path and its wake, was alone. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. As I walked through our camp and returned salute after salute, I felt more a part of a family than I ever had. My father and his concubines, our mansion with its countless servants, our kilometers after kilometers of private, empty lands. None of it ever was a true family life. But now I was surrounded by dozens of brothers and sisters in arms, fighting for a very existence. I had never felt so alive. I walked towards the man who had woken me with his distinctive shout. I strode up to Colonel Adams and snapped off a proper salute. "Corporal Whitcomb reporting, sir." Adams chuckled and returned the salute. "Good evening, Alex. You can be so formal sometimes." I smiled. Colonel Harrison Adams was the man who found me in the little shop 3 months back, trying to pry a top off a bottle of water. Then just a lieutenant leading a small band, he had been kind enough to help me open it, and respectful enough not to remark on my expensive and fancy safari attire at the time. So I didn't mind when he gave me a friendly ribbing for my ingrained formality. He had taken me under his wing and trained me in the ways of the soldier. He said I was a natural, and my mission since then, as both a grunt and an NCO, had proven him right. Like most, I had risen quickly in the ranks through both accomplishment and attrition. I was proud of the woman I had become. But deep inside, I knew I was still that scared kid who jumped into the flames on Viridian to escape the war, only to jump into another war. "Up for leading a raid tonight?" asked Adams. He drank from a canteen, then held it out. I shook my head. "No, thank you, sir." Adams' eyebrows rose. Turning down a mission? That's not like the Alex we've come to know. Sorry, sir, I meant no thank you for the water. Damn right I'm up for a raid, sir. Adams smiled. Thought so. Assemble your squad. Cruz's scouts found a collective landing pad carved out of the jungle about 20 clicks from here. He thinks it's a transmit terminal for their assassin squads to travel between the surface and orbit. If we're lucky, we can cut off their supply line of those goddamn killers. He inclined his chin towards the motor pool tent. Your squad, along with Cruz's and Delahanty's, are leaving in an hour. He smiled again. And you're taking our only half-track, so don't waste it. I snapped off a salute and trotted towards the tent. I never felt so alive. The scream over the radio sounded like Corporal Delahanty's second-in-command PFC Huang. It ended in a wet gurgle and burst of static. I dropped the radio to the spongy jungle floor and closed my eyes. The raid had come apart at the seams just minutes after arriving at the rally point. It was almost like the collective knew we were coming. They didn't. I knew that. They were just flat out better than we were. They were well equipped with top-of-the-line gear and augmentation. We were struggling to find batteries. We were losing. All across the planet. And my optimism faded with each death. I opened my eyes and looked down at the radio, willing it to crackle with Delahanty's voice, or anyone from Bravo, but it remained silent. Alpha, Cruz's scouts, bought it when a collective anti-personnel missile slammed into the cab of the half-track. Bravo had been dropped off at a small ridge overlooking the landing pad. My squad, Charlie, was only meters away from the truck when it blew. Of my squad of 10, only 3 besides me survived the blast. Alpha was completely gone. The pieces of them that remained would be unidentifiable to even the most skilled field medic. And now Bravo had apparently been found, probably eliminated. I turned to the moaning man next to me. Specialist Radance was missing his left arm. A bloody bandage pack covering the stump at his shoulder showed the end result of hypervelocity shrapnel. Collective didn't believe in half-assing anything. Their weapons were, for lack of a better term, inhumane. Which was ironic to some extent, considering they were humans themselves, at least mostly. But they were ruthless in their ambitions and believed that wounding soldiers was more effective against guerrillas than killing them. It slowed down the enemy, and I had to grudgingly agree. Radance was less useful to me than if he were a full casualty. I cursed myself for being so cold. That was another change in me. 3 long months of being exposed to death and wanton destruction could harden anyone. But as Colonel Adams taught me, it was necessary when leading family into battle. Detachment, he called it. Whatever it was, it just felt cold. Specialist, can you get any reading on the assassin squad's location? We had confirmed that the landing site was a transit area for assassins, and stumbled across a squad that had just arrived via shuttle. Private McNally's shoulder-fired Lance HE destroyed the shuttle, but the assassins themselves escaped into the thick jungle, from where they were now picking us off one by one. Radance tapped at the datapad prop between his knees. No, Corporal, he said, then grunted in pain as he shifted his weight. Still no track on their life signs. I cursed under my breath. This raid couldn't have gone more wrong. I checked my pistol's battery. Down to 18%. I cursed again. The Stieg had served me well. 2 assassins and a perimeter guard were sent into the afterlife by it in the last hour, but it was at the end of its own life now. I peeked over the mound of rotting logs we hid behind. Radance, McNally, and Peterson were all that was left of my squad. I'd never share another chocolate bar with Private Greeley, or play cards across the table from Specialist Stevens, or steal off into the jungle for some personal time with PFC Westhaven again. I swallowed the lump in my throat, a combination of the feelings of loss and the dread of what lay before us. The landing pad was now reinforced with extra guards. I could just make out their black combat armor in the dim moonlight. The active camo armor the assassins wore would never be seen, not until it was too late and they were on top of you, killing you. Our only hope was Radance's sensor array he had set up on the far ridge just before taking the shrapnel round. But apparently that hope was unfounded. The assassin's gear was just too good. There was no retreat. The collective knew which direction we had come from, and they smartly cut us off. One of their assault boats had lain a carpet of explosives along that path not long after the first encounter. To either flank were undoubtedly the assassins. Ahead lay the landing pad and a dozen guards, if not more. This was a last stand. A fleeting memory of the lone soldier on Viridian flashed across my mind, and I laughed, in spite of the situation. McNally looked at me with a frown, then turned his attention back to the target. Something Radance said earlier bubbled up to the surface. I nudged him, and he cried out in pain. I ignored it. Carl, that strange reading you got when you first set up the array. Radance's face screwed up in pain and confusion. What? The reading your sensors picked up, the heat source. Show me again. He swallowed, then tapped with one hand on the data pad. I looked down and saw the image he initially detected on the far side of the landing pad. I had ordered him to redirect the sensors toward the shuttle area in a search for the assassin's life signs, but something about the first blurry image the array had picked up before being redirected looked familiar. McNally, what do you see here? I asked. The private looked at the datapad briefly, then back to the target, but then quickly back to the datapad. Huh, kinda looks like one of the flames. I knew McNally had experienced the flames before. He was the only other person I had met who had. He, like me, was from a privileged family, which was usually the only way to afford the exorbitant costs of traveling across the flames. I wanted his opinion, and he confirmed what the nagging thought was in the back of my mind. The frozen image on Radance's screen showed the cool blue outline of a small room. Distinct lines showed thick walls that ran perpendicular to each other, forming a narrow rectangle. Near the top end of the rectangle was what looked like a dotted line, a partial wall, behind which was an arrow-shaped heat source of incredible intensity. The tip of the arrow, the furthest part of the heat source from the dotted line, was cool blue. The sensors painted the rest of the arrow in white, the highest level of heat. Almost nuclear, I thought, and remembered back to my first trip through the flames. I thought the heat would blister my skin clean off, then bake my bones. But just past some invisible threshold, it disappeared. It does, doesn't it? I said quietly. I had failed in coming to Eunesis too late, but maybe I could still... said McNally. The collective destroys them all every time. Flames left. But what if they kept one for their own use? What if they always keep one hidden away in case of emergency? I asked. That's a freaking stretch, ma'am, said Peterson, and a freaking slim chance. She had her combat helmet off, as did we all, and was working at the visor with a small tool. I glanced at my own, sitting on the jungle floor next to me. The visor had been shattered by a collective bullet, which exited the side of my helmet, leaving it in ruins. A centimeter to the right, and my head would have burst like an overripe melon. I shouldn't be alive, I thought. So why not take a slim chance? Carl, how far is that building from the array? Radance tapped at the datapad. Half a click east. But even if it is a flame, we've got no ferryman, said McNally. He was staring at me now. No one can use a flame without a guide. I opened my mouth to reply, but snapped it shut as I saw movement over McNally's shoulder. Get down, I yelled, just as energy pulses smashed into the wet log in front of us, sending steaming wood and moss in every direction. A collective assassin had gotten the jump on us and flanked our position. That slim chance was now or never, I thought. I pushed Radance over the log as McNally and Peterson jumped it. Peterson was firing her Gans M22 from her hip as she moved, the 12mm round spitting rapid fire from the snub barrel with the sound of paper tearing. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the blurry outline of the assassin's camo slide behind a tree trunk. "Cover me!" I yelled. "I'm headed east!" I followed Radance over, grabbing Peterson's helmet as I went. I slammed it down over my head, engaging the collar seal. The visor's HUD lit up with the layout of the clearing. The jungle exploded behind me as coherent light rained in. I slammed my back into the steel wall of the tiny building, pistol held in front of me with both hands. The battery indicator was down to a single digit. I was down to my last few minutes. I wasn't sure how many of my squad were left, if any. The firing rate of the collective's weapons steadily increased as I ran through the jungle, but slackened in the last few minutes. I suspected that was because the collective was running out of targets. My family. I took several deep breaths, trying to tamp down my emotions. I was running out of time. Eunesis was running out of time. I didn't have a ferryman, so my chances of surviving a trip through the flames was slim, as Peterson said. But I had to take that chance. A tree 20 meters in front of me exploded into shards. The report of a heavy weapon came a split second afterwards. My time was up. I turned and kicked at the steel door to the building. It rattled, but held. I took a rueful look at the battery indicator on my pistol, then fired into the door jamb. 2 pulses, then a buzz as the power died. I kicked one last time, and the door gave way. I burst into the room, stumbling to my knees, and froze. At the back of the room, the flames flickered behind a thin curtain of what appeared to be beads or crystals. I'd seen that once before, back on Malachite. It was decorative only, making the entire room dance with light, and explained the dotted line on Radance's sensors. But the light wasn't what stunned me. I wasn't alone. 2 people stood in the room, both with their mouths open in surprise. A young girl, probably no older than me, dressed in fine, regal clothing, stood in front of an older woman. I ground my teeth together as I recognized the woman as Mary Beth Rush, a ferryman, bringing a young girl to a war zone, just like before. My heart skipped a beat as the connection was made. This had all happened before, and it was all happening again. And Rush? Coincidence? Or was she there with a purpose? Was she working with the collective? Was she scouting planets scheduled for destruction? Or was she just unlucky? Luck, I thought with an inner laugh. No such thing. Not anymore. If there ever was. An explosion sounded behind me. The assassins were closing in. I stood up slowly. The young girl sneered at me. "This isn't part of the tour," she said in a haughty tone. "I demand you take me to see the Emerald Caverns like the ticket says." She turned around to face Rush and stuck a finger out, pointing. "Or I'm telling my father, and you'll be out of a job." This had all happened before. I was the young girl just 3 months ago. I grew up under fire. And now, maybe, I was passing that along. It was all happening again. Someone else would grow up. The collective would move on, raising another planet as the battlefront shifted again. Maybe she would be in time. Or maybe she would be too late. I knew there was only one thing I could do. I thought of my father, of my family in the unit, of Colonel Adams, of being in West Haven's arms one last time, of the flames. I activated my helmet speakers. Hurry, there isn't much time.
Walk the Fire by John Miro. Learn more at servingworlds.com. Theme music, Full On by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Many of the stories you listen to at servingworlds.com were made possible by the support of patrons at patreon.com/servingworlds. If you like what you hear, please consider adding your support. Thank you for listening.